Hello, I am Tacky Slappy, and today I'll be reading you Chapter 2 of Ronnie McKitty. I've got a little thing to say, but I'll say that after the chapter. Anyways, Chapter 2. It was a cold, foggy morning by the time Ronnie made it out the door, and by then a distant bell had begun to ring. People started coming out of their houses when they heard the sound. Greasy hair and grimy faces made it clear that the city folk were poor, and on their bodies most wore the same kind of long tunic that Ronnie was wearing, though their garments were in much better condition than his. Despite the mostly disheveled appearances, most of them had come out of their own separate homes. That meant that while they certainly weren't rich, they were probably still above the poverty line. Ronnie attributed the lackluster hygiene to it being more difficult to stay clean there. The house he'd come from didn't even have a sink, so it seemed reasonable to assume that running water was a rarity. About a third of the townsfolk carried axes on their backs, and many of which were even larger than the one he'd been killed with. Men, women, and even some children held the tools, and while Ronnie didn't know what use they had for such gigantic tools, it was clear that the blades were held in high regard. Virtually without exception, the axes were kept in pristine condition. Many had decorative patterns engraved into the handle, and the most impressive ones were made from a strange metal that seemed to glow in a blue hue. The little kitchen knife hidden away in his breast pocket suddenly felt a lot less reliable. Many people shot wary glances over at the clearly foreign man standing on their neighbor's doorstep, but nobody stopped to say anything. The bells continued ringing took precedence, and they were already too hurried to care about him. Not wanting to have any more witnesses than he already did, Ronnie joined the crowd. After walking a few minutes further from the wall, the people reached the end of the residential area and came upon a commercial district. Shops and stalls lined the streets, congesting the ever-increasing foot traffic. The buildings were taller and more intricate than the houses closer to the wall, and clotheslines hung across the street from small balconies above the storefronts, suggesting that the shopkeepers both did business and lived in their stores. Out of breath, Ronnie found a bench and sat down. While resting, a particularly striking building caught his attention. It was much taller than the surroundings, and it featured large glass windows with an interior decorated by ornate wallpaper. There was a huge sign hanging above the front facade that in big red letters denoted that the building was the Thelza Company Lower Ring Doralside Outpost. I guess this area is called the Lower Ring Doralside then. Good to know, I guess. It was hard to make out much detail with all the people passing by, but it looked like they were selling trinkets of some sort, all of which were locked behind thick glass enclosures. After a good rest, Ronnie got back up and rejoined the crowd. They started climbing a huge though gradual hill, and as the altitude increased, so too did the grandeur of the buildings. It wasn't long before they came to a tall wooden wall, which was probably about 30 feet up from the ground. Situated on top of it were guards with big longbows in hand. They watched the crowd with cautious eyes, ready to shoot if anyone stepped out of line. Eventually, Ronnie and the crowd made it to a raised gate and went through. As the guards ushered them along a predetermined path through the area, Ronnie saw why it had been cordoned off from the rest of the city. There were gated mansions with servants wandering about, big libraries with hundreds of windows, and in the distance there was a grand church that stretched high into the sky. Jutting out from the already impressive temple was an even taller bell tower, from which came the ringing of the bell. Looks like the rich people here don't care much for the common folk, but their walls and whatnot. Shocker. Like the rest of the city, the brilliance of the structures increased with elevation. The villas he'd seen near the gate paled in comparison to the full-blown estates closer to the top, which had guest houses that were just as large as the mansions below them. The main houses bordered on palaces. Ronnie tried to rest on a bench one last time before finishing the trip, but one of the guards got angry and told him to get a move on, almost as soon as he sat down. He obeyed the man without a word and got back up. As the climb continued, and the morning fog lifted, the hill's impressive size allowed for a few glances of the city as a whole. Walls wrapped around the city, except on the coast, which was devoid of them to allow easy access to a busy harbor. Every ship in the bay was enormous, and most featured wide hulls fit for carrying cargo. Almost all of them were built from wood, but there were a few exceptions that caught Ronnie's attention. They were steel-hulled barges that featured smokestacks and engines instead of masts. The ironclad boats were by far the most formidable vessels in the harbor, and the smallest of them were still several times larger than the largest wooden ship. So there are other countries in this world then. Strange. Those almost look contemporary. Teams of people, tiny in the distance, work together to pull huge carts to and from the ships. The ones going to the ships almost exclusively carry timber, usually no more than 1 or 2 logs per cart. Looking at the logs, Ronnie understood why everything in the city was made from wood. Damn, those are bigger than sequoias, by a wide margin at that. Guess that's what those axes are for? The carts coming into the city seemed to hold manufactured goods of some sort, but the actual products were concealed or small in the distance, so he didn't really know what the exchange entailed. As he reached the top of the hill, Ronnie's attention turned away from the ocean. The destination was a huge stone castle with a huge stone wall all to itself. On that wall were archers holding impossibly large bows. From end to end, the weapons were more than twice the height of the people holding them, and despite that, the archers were holding them horizontally without the need for support. Ronnie went through the gate and came to a grassy courtyard. There had to have been at least 1,000 people standing there by the time he arrived, and there was still a steady stream of people coming in behind him. Must be important. Unable to find a bench, Ronnie just sat down against the wall. After the courtyard was full, a man that was easily more than 9 feet tall came out from one of the castle's many high balconies. On his body was a suit of armor and a narrow greatsword long enough to cut several men in half with a single swing. Both the armor and the weapon were made from the strange, luminescent material that Ronnie had seen many people carrying every now and again. Whatever. The man looked down at the crowd and shook his head. Greetings, commoners of Barnock. As I'm sure you all know, I'm Grayson, the strongest and most respected knight in the country. There weren't any microphones or speakers in the courtyard, but everyone could hear his voice. The crowd cheered at his introduction, despite the ego. After waiting for the noise to die down, Grayson pulled out a piece of paper. I'll get straight to it. Due to a stronger than expected response from the demon army, the line of contention has been pushed further northward than expected. Fort Ignar has been compromised, and the demons have control of it now. As such, a siege on Barnock is now within the realm of possibility. He sighed, not with grief, but boredom. Because of the latest developments, King Grivelspire has opted to take a more serious approach from here onwards. That means that everyone level 15 and up, as well as anyone who possesses rare skills or abilities, will be conscripted into military service. Everyone else will be expected to support the war however they can and to obey orders from military officials. The crowd exploded into a violent uproar, though the watchful gaze of archers strongly discouraged any disorderly behavior. Ronnie continued, as he had before, effortlessly drowning out the crowd's roars with his impossibly loud voice. In short, Barnock will be under martial law for the next few months. If you haven't had your stats recorded in the last 18 months, it is mandatory to have that done at any Thelza outpost by the end of the week. That's all I've got. With that, Ronnie disappeared back into the castle. As soon as the announcement was over, the guards started ushering people out of the courtyard and down the hill until everyone was out of the middle ring, which was what the area was called according to some conversations he'd overheard. Ronnie took a seat on a bench near the gate and began contemplating the situation. Damn, if it wasn't bad enough to be robbed of my house, my health, and my friends by an unknown force for an unknown reason, then surely the fact that it also made me a foreigner in a country straight out of the Middle Ages that just so happens to be in the process of losing a war definitely takes it over the edge. Well, what now? I think it's safe to assume that it'll take me at least a few days to figure out how to get home. So I guess I should look for a place to stay in the meantime? I guess some food would be nice too. Ronnie spent a while watching the foot traffic. The majority of people were thoroughly average in height, build, and attire, but there were more than a few outliers. A tall man with elongated arms that stretched all the way to the ground, a woman with electric sparks dancing from her fingertips, and a few others with similarly bizarre characteristics. Curiously, the people with mutations always looked wealthy. It really is another world. How the hell did I get here? The only thing he had as a clue was the voice that had spoken when he came back to life. Wiseman's vassal was what it said. Is that supposed to be referring to me? wasn't much to work with, but it was his only lead. Maybe someone here will know something about it. Wouldn't hurt to ask. Well, first things first, according to that Grayson guy, I need to go to that Thelza outpost place soon, so I might as well take care of it now. Plus, I'm curious what the stats he mentioned will entail. With a tentative plan in place, Ronnie got off the bench and started walking. Alright, thanks for reading the second chapter, and I just want to apologize for the, I guess, slow start. Like, I guess this is kind of just setting the scene, sorta? I don't know. I just feel like nothing really happened in this chapter, and I promise the next one is better. That's already written, and someone who has read it has confirmed that, yes, that is more interesting. But, yeah, I guess be patient with it. Also, on a side note, I switched up my recording methodology a little bit, and all I really did was get closer to the microphone, and I think that yielded some pretty good results, actually. I guess we'll see. So if anyone wants to put their take in the comments on that, I guess. I don't know. What else do I want to say? Oh yeah, I'm thinking about making some like other non-web serial related, or maybe like web serial related but not Ronnie McKitty related videos coming up. So I don't know. Maybe expect that. Is that all I have to say? Let me think. Yes. All right. Well, peace out, I guess. Have a good day.